Step one is to turn the microphone on. Thank you, Melanie and Angeline. There you go. That's the sound check I was needing. How's the sound coming through now? Okay. Perfect. Fantastic. I'll bet you the screen is probably now getting choppy, isn't it? I know, Melanie. I goof that up all the time. Everybody doing all right? Okay, cool. So it's running pretty smoothly. You can see the video. Or not the video, but you can see me. Fantastic. Good deal. We got 4 people on. We're still running a couple of minutes early. Wow, I had like 60 people on for my 150 class today, Melanie. I absolutely freaked out, man. I felt like I was playing Madison Square Gardens, right? So many people there. I got really nervous. This should be a little smaller class, only 10 or 15 of you, maybe. Ooh, that probably sounded bad. I should avoid drinking. Or drink quietly. Who else is here? I see we've got Melanie, Angeline, Erica's here. Anybody else? Hello, Fatima. No, I want to take my complexity up slowly and not get too complex too fast, because if you make a mistake on live TV, it goes pretty poorly, right? So I'm starting out simple, Melanie. Hello, Ali. Good to see you. Does anybody know about this sign right here? Anybody know what city this sign is? If you've ever been there, you'll know. Wow, looks like we've got 8 viewers. Fantastic. Fantastic. Hope everybody's found. Okay. Well, I'll tell you. It's actually from Austin, Austin, Texas. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Austin, Texas, but if you like to hear live music, drink a beer, and have a whole heck of a lot of fun, Austin is definitely, and eat good food, Austin is definitely the place for you. Some of you may not be into that, but I found Austin to be a great place. Fantastic. Okay, we are at 1 o'clock, so I guess that's about time to go ahead and get started. I wanted to introduce myself to those of you who don't know me. My name's Dr. Chris Roddenberry. I'm an associate professor of psychology here at Wake Tech. I've been here for about 16 years. I've been teaching online for about 17 years, and I've been doing live online stuff since 2007, so I guess that'll be 13 years. So I've been using technology quite a bit in trying to create cool online environments, and this is my latest environment, and I hope you like it. I'm assuming all of you can hear me and can see me well enough. I keep looking over here at my monitor. I've got a monitor over here where I can see how many people are here and what my picture looks like, so I'm going to be checking that from time to time to make sure nothing goes awry, okay? I've actually got your chat board over here too. Yeah, I've been teaching here for 16 years. Let's see, I'm actually live streaming to you right now from Willow Springs, North Carolina. Anybody from Willow Springs, North Carolina? I'm about a mile from the Lowe's in Willow Springs. If you want to communicate with me during this lecture, it won't be as good as synchronous, but it's pretty close. You can type comments in the chat bar, the YouTube chat bar that you see. It should be to this side of you, this side of me right now. Or if you want, you can send me remind texts, and I've got my phone sitting right here so I can respond to those too. If you have questions or comments, feel free to participate in today's lecture. Okay, let's see. This link is also going to be a recording too. So So if you don't get to lecture one day and you want to come back and watch the lecture, you just come click on the same link, and as soon as the broadcast over, it will go from a live stream to a recording. If you will, please subscribe to my channel. I think you have to click on that little bell thing below me, and if you do that, you'll get reminders about all of the lectures. I'm going to be sending text reminders too, so it might be redundant, but they always, every time I watch a video, they're always like, subscribe to my channel. So you know what? Subscribe to my channel too if you would. I hope I didn't send too many texts today. Usually the first week I'm trying to make sure everybody's on the same page so that we don't, everybody gets started and gets doing everything properly as quickly as possible. So I might have sent a couple extra texts. I'll try not to burn up your text too much, but if I am texting too much, go ahead and let me know. You can type it in the chat bar now or send me a text to tell me not to text you. It's up to you. But so that's what I just wanted. Those are sort of my introductory comments. Again, Dr. Roddenberry coming to you from Willow Spring, North Carolina. What I'd like to do real quick, if we could, is give you a couple of notes. I'd like to go to the whiteboard and show you a couple of notes, okay? I got my whiteboard over here in the studio in case there's something I want to tell you that I don't feel like making a text about. And so over here, if you look at the whiteboard today, I want you to know that 24 out of 28 of you have already completed the course entry quiz, and we're only 24 hours into the semester. Congratulations. Thank you for doing a great job. And I want you to know that 27 out of 28 of you have signed up for Remind. I am super duper proud of that. And you know what, folks? I swear you deserve to give yourself a round of applause, okay? So, fantastic. So bask in that glory for just a little bit. Now, what I want you to know about this class, I've had students ask me, they're acting as if coming to the YouTube class is mandatory. It is actually not mandatory. You can either watch the videos to get the lectures material, or you can read the book if you want. And the videos or the book are going to prepare you for the tests and the homework. Some students want to come to a lecture and have a teacher here. Melanie's in my class for the second semester. We've talked about this plenty of times. She prefers to have a live lecture. So here it is. If you're an autodidact and you don't need any help, feel free just to read the book to get the test and the homework. I do provide the PowerPoint presentations that will help you if you decide to read along with the book. Also, I've got a webinar or a discussion board every week. Some people have been wondering if the webinar is mandatory. No, it's not. You can do the webinar or the discussion board for your collaboration grade each week. So the way I've got it set up is if you are really that kind of student that wants to be around your teacher a lot, you can get a fully seated experience by coming to the live lectures and the webinars. If you're one of those students that doesn't want to be bothered and has been in 100 online classes and knows exactly what you're doing, feel free to choose the fully online experience and do the discussion board and read the book. And then I have hybrid choices for you too. And the neat thing about this model is you can choose to do it any way you want to do it. So you don't necessarily have to do it the same way every week. You can change from week to week to week depending upon your preferences. So I'll leave it up to you. Does anybody have any questions yet? Hi, Eric. It's good to see you. Okay. Well, you know what, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started on Chapter 1. I'm assuming everybody can still hear me. You see Chapter 1 PowerPoint up here behind me, right here. And that's the wrap-up, so let's get to the beginning of it. So, Introduction to the Lifespan Perspective. So what we're going to do today is we're going to sort of introduce to you the idea of the lifespan perspective. We're going to talk about what it is and why it's important. We're going to talk about the 8 principles of the lifespan perspective. I'm going to talk about different ways of thinking about age for a few minutes, and then we're going to talk about some of the developmental issues that are important in the study of human development. Hi, Andre. It's good to see you. Lorena's here. Chris Chris Flores. Hey, 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 how are you doing, man? Chris is from, what, 2 semesters ago, 3 semesters ago, I think. It's been a while. So we're going to talk, this is what we plan to cover today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Uh-oh. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Hold on just a minute. Something has gone wrong with my PowerPoints. Let's see. Okay, really quick. Hold on, folks. Just a second. Crapola. Okay. Give me about 2 seconds. I'm going to upload my slide deck again. It's gone wrong. Let's go ahead and do that. Get me over there. Give me about 2 seconds, folks. I don't know what happened to my slide deck. Do 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 and there we go. Boom and 4. All right. Aha. Okay. So what is the study of human development? Now, what I like about developmental psychology is it encompasses every other area of human psychology. So if you remember from Psych 150, you learned about cognitive psychology. Well, you know what? There's an interest in what we would call cognitive development. How does our thinking change over the lifespan, right? There's a chapter for biological psychology, which is interested in how the brain controls our behavior. Developmental biologists are interested in how the brain's ability to control our behavior develops over time. So developmental psychology really relates to all other areas of psychology, and it's interested in trying to understand how our physical, cognitive, and socio-emotional abilities evolve as we move from birth to death. All right. Human developmental psychologists are interested in figuring out the patterns of development, how, when, and why things change in human psychological functioning. And so the lifespan perspective is going to be interested in how our abilities grow, how we maintain them, and how we regulate them, and what happens when they decline ultimately. And it's going to be interested in how we change as a function of our biology, as a function of our culture, and how our individual experience affects our development. And it's also, developmental psychology is interested in how we change throughout the lifespan. Most of the time when people hear developmental psychology, they think of babies. And that is one area where developmental psychology is, most people think about developmental psychology as studying babies, but developmental psychologists are interested in how we function and how our functioning changes throughout the lifespan. Now, why are we interested in developmental psychology? You know what? Because it helps. So, if you think about it now, this is just a guesstimate, but we think that the upper boundary of human life, the human lifespan, is about 122. We don't know many people who've lived beyond 122 in recorded history, so we think that that's pretty much what we might call the upper boundary or the maximum lifespan. Now, the current life expectancy in the United States is right around 80, 79 or so, but it wasn't always like that. In fact, did you know that in 1900, the average lifespan in the United States was 47 years of age? Many people didn't make it out of infancy or early childhood. Many people died young because of poor health habits. And so developmental psychology has allowed us to understand how people develop and grow, and it's allowed us to create policies and to create a world that helps us to develop along our maximum potential and also in our maximum health. right? So we learn how to address children's disabilities, problems in development, inadequacies or inefficiencies that children might have. We can now spot them, and we learn how to give children exactly what they need so that they grow as healthy as possible. I don't know if you know this, but when I was born in 1969, my mom told me that they didn't have formula back then. So what they would do is they would give their kids cow's milk and just stir in a little bit of sugar. And so it was sweet cow's milk was one of the formulas that my mom gave me. Can any of you imagine giving that to your kid right now? I don't think so. But basically, developmental psychology has allowed us to create the conditions where people are more likely to make it into adulthood and live long, active, healthy lives. Now, where does developmental psychology fit in? You know what? They help us to understand the link between our health and well-being. So we now know that if you want to keep your mental facilities as an older adult, you need to engage in athletic activities. You have got to keep moving. Lifting weights and doing aerobic activity as an older adult is one major protective factor from cognitive decline that normally occurs in adulthood. So it sort of informs behavioral psychology, if you will. Policy issues as well. We now know that developmental psychologists follow death statistics. Now, I don't know if you know this, but suicides and homicides are way up in America, especially in white populations, Caucasian populations, and these appear to be associated with what they call deaths of despair. So people who are having trouble dealing with their current situation. Now, by knowing this particular historical effect, maybe policy that can be developed to help treat things like opioid addiction and other things that appear to be attacking parts of our society. Developmental psychology has helped us to understand the link between socioeconomic status and academic indicators in early childhood. Head Start is a program. I don't know if any of you have heard of Head Start. Head Start is a policy program that was developed to help young, lower income children who were not getting the stimulating environments that they needed in preschool at the preschool age. And so it's allowed us to see these other different environments and cultures and socioeconomic statuses that need some sort of extra help. And there's lots of advice that developmental psychologists would give to expectant parents so that their babies are born as healthy as possible. Milestones that help parents track their children's healthy development. Expectations for how to train children's behavior and help them develop self-control and other skills that will make them successful adults. So there's lots of areas in which developmental psychology plays a part in making society healthier and happier. So that's why I believe you ought to be interested in taking this class. Not only is it a combination of psychology, of all the areas of psychology, so we're going to walk back through psychology, talking about all the different areas, biopsych, cognitive psych, behaviorism, but we're going to talk about them from the developmental perspective, and this class is going to be more like a how to live your best life class. That's what I'm going to try to do, how to live your best and happiest life. All right, so there's a very important developmental psychologist named Paul Baltes, who sort of summed up, if you will, the tenets, the beliefs that sort of constitute what we would call the modern developmental lifespan perspective. And he comes up with 7 principles which sort of encapsulate what we believe about developmental psychology. I would like for you to be familiar with these 7 developmental capacities for the first exam. The first thing is you need to keep in mind that development is lifelong. You are not done changing until you die, right? So mental facilities change throughout your life. Physical abilities change throughout your life. And the second thing is that it is multidimensional. We change on many different trajectories. So we all have a physical developmental trajectory. We all have a cognitive mental trajectory. And we all have a socio-emotional or a personality developmental trajectory. So we actually develop along multi-dimensions, if you will. All right? And you know what? If development is lifelong, it is going to be multi-directional. And we're going to talk about the inevitable decline of our abilities and how we deal with that. Paul Baltes is interested in what he calls successful aging, and he argues that people who are able to engage in successful aging learn how to engage in selection, optimization, and oh my goodness, SOC, and when you make up for something, you selection, optimization, and forgot the third one. But he suggested that human beings learn how to manage their compensation, selection, optimization, and compensation. So we learn how to deal with our declining abilities by focusing on other aspects of our life that help us to successfully age. Think of the wily veteran. They don't have as much skill as they used to, but they've got it up here. Thank you, Eric Fleming. Oh, my goodness. I can't believe this. Eric Fleming had to give me the high five with the answer there. Check plus to you, Eric Fleming, today. And so it's he also argues that we have to think about this biology, so our own we're going to talk about our own genetic potential. We're going to talk about the cultures in which we live in, and then we're going to talk about the individual circumstances that differentiate people inside of cultures. So how was my family different from your family? Now, we both may be Americans, and that's a socio-cultural effect on both of us, but my family was different than the way your family was, and that's what we would call an individual factor. And so development is sort of a combination of all 3 of these factors, and it is also contextual. It's contextual. So Chris Flores made a funny COVID comment a little bit earlier, not even so much funny as ironic, but let's talk about those contextual influences. So Paul Baltes thought that really if you thought about the context of our life, you can think about different things as affecting us. So this week, when in your resources folder, I have a video called 63 Up. Now, 63 Up is the continuation of a video series started in the early 60s as 7 Up. And what British Broadcasting Company, the BBC, did in 1963 it was, I think, no, 60, I don't know, in the early 60s, they found a group of 14 7-year-olds, and they videotaped them to find out what these kids were like. Then they went back at 14 years of age and videotaped these same kids. Then they went back at 21 and videotaped these same kids. At 28, at 35, at 42. And what I've provided for you is a video called 63 Up, which follows a couple of the people, and it follows them through all of these videos so that you can see the trajectory of their development. And what you'll notice if you watch these videos is the things that that context really does matter. We all have a biological component, but context really does matter. And so the kinds of contextual things that affect us are what you might call normative age-graded influences, non-normative life events, and cohort effects. And these are sort of things that developmental psychologists try to think about when piecing together the story of how human beings change over the course of a lifespan. Normative graded influences are those things that kind of change you that happen at very predictable times. For example, we all start school here in the United States around 5 or 6. We all get married in our early 20s. We all have children. We all used to get married in our 20s. We all used to have children in our 20s. Things are changing now, though, right? And you know what? My child called me today, my youngest son. He's 18. He just got his first career job, and it's in Fayetteville. And he told me about an hour and a half ago that he's moving out of the house. Think of that. We all have a time to move out of the house, too. And these are all normative age-graded events that kind of affect how we develop. You're a different person before you had children than after you had children. I don't know if any of you are parents out there, but the children do change you. Ha ha, Melanie, you calling me an old man. I resemble that remark. I know it's the change of life. Mrs. Roddenberry hasn't found out that he's moving out. So I expect it's going to be a sad, weepy night in the Roddenberry household, because she's going to start crying, and as soon as she does, I'm going to start crying too. So that's normative events. But then there are non-normative life events too that affect us. So I've had friends that have lost parents as children. I've known people who've had cancer at a young age. What about parents who lose young children? These are non-normative life events that also affect our development too. And then you know what, for you millennials, you've existed through the great crash of 2009, and now you're going through the COVID crash. And so if you think about it, there are also what we would call cohort effects that affect our development. So, for example, my grandma was born in 1920, and she lived through the Great Depression. And so you can talk to her, and after about a half an hour, you can see where the Great Depression still plays a large part in her personality. All right? There are people who grew up in the civil rights and women's rights movements. I grew up during the ERA movement of the 70s, and that's really affected how I think about female and male relations. And so these cohort affects whole groups of people too. And these are sort of the yeah, Eric says he can't wait to tell his kids about the nightmare of 2020. People won't believe we lived through it, will they, Eric? Oh my God, it couldn't have been that bad. And then there were killer bees, and then there were earthquakes and hurricanes. Oh my God, right? Can you imagine what people 50 years from now will think about what we're going through? So, fantastic. Now, one of the things that Paul Baltes is interested in is what we would call successful aging. And that's being that kind of person that's really old and spry, and people laugh when they hear about you and they say, wow, that old Chris, man, can you believe he's 95 years old and still kicking and doing this and this and this? Paul Baltes suggests that we really can have an impact with our behavioral choices on how successful our aging is. But you know what? I know all of you have, well, some of you are old enough to have been back to 20th school reunions or 25th school reunions. I'm coming up on my 30, wait a minute, 17. Oh my God, I already had my 30th. Okay, when you come up on your 30 or your 35th school reunion, what you're going to find is some people don't look good, right? When you get there, you're going to see that they look older. Maybe their minds don't work as sharply. Maybe they're kind of socially withdrawn. And you know what? Those people might demonstrate what we call pathological aging too. And then we differentiate from all the rest of us that seem to fall somewhere there in the middle. And so you can think about how we age as being this pattern of physical, cognitive, and socio-emotional change. And for some of us, the decline comes much later in life as we are successful agers. And some people demonstrate pathological aging. And while you can't sometimes things happen, there are things I can teach you this semester that will hopefully put you on the path to successful aging. Oh, and by the way, take a look at this young lady right here at her 99th birthday and again at her 100th birthday. This is my grandma. She is the most impressive 100-year-old lady you will ever meet. She still lives on her own with no assistance. She gets dressed, she feeds herself. She lives unassisted in her own home at the age of 100. She drove herself to her birthday party at the age of 100. And she even still has a couple of small rental properties, so she runs her own business at the age of 100. Nana's freaking awesome. I love her. And you know, the cool thing is, every time you say goodbye to her, you're like, Nana, I'll see you next week. She always goes, if I'm still living, honey. And that's the way she says goodbye. And she's been saying that for about the last 10 years now. If I'm living, honey, she'll see you next week. She actually she worked part-time until she was in her 90s. She worked at the retirement center helping the old people. How hilarious is that? I met her when she was 70, or excuse me, she's actually my step-grandma, my grandma-in-law, my wife's mother. But I call her my grandma. She's been around for 30 years, right? So, yep, this is my grandma. So my wife's got good genes, unfortunately, Eric, which means she will get to spend the money that we save after I'm long gone. Oh, well, such is life. That's why I get out and run every day, man. I jog every day, trying to overcome those poor genes that I have. Okay, right? So when we think about aging, let's not only think about age as a number. A lot of people think of age as just a number. But really, when you look at people, some people are 95 and still kicking. Some people are 45, and you can tell that they're not doing well. So number isn't necessarily the best way to think about aging. And so when we think about successful aging, we're going to think about biological, psychological, and social age, right? So how healthy are you? How flexible are you? How do you have COPD, heart disease? Are you able to avoid these pitfalls of middle and late adulthood? If you do, then you might be relatively young in terms of biological age. On the other hand, psychological age, you know, we all want to keep our mind, and that's the one thing that Nana says to us. She does not want to be on this earth if she loses her mind. She only wants to be here as long as she's sharp. And so you can think about psychological aging. Some people may have dementia is actually a normal part of most people's late adulthood experience. The question is, when does the dementia and the intellectual difficulties start? How late in life does that start? Right? And then we might think about psychological age, you know, being plugged in, having friends, being engaged in activities. Nana's always traveling to somebody's house. She's traveling to the grandkids. She's traveling to the kids. You'll see her at her birthday party. She's, until a couple of years ago, her friend Bernice, they would talk 3 and 4 times a day. Bernice lived to 99 herself, so they were the longest pair of Montgomery County ladies you ever saw, and they used to talk every day. And so you can think of psychological social age as another form of aging. How long are you able to keep and maintain those social interactions that are so valuable for human survival? So when we're thinking about being successful agers, we want to try to be successful on all of these different dimensions, because age is not just a number, right? Now, some people who focus on development like to think of age in terms of sort of these four broad ages. So your childhood, your early adulthood, and then what we would call your early late adulthood and your late adulthood. Now, we do this because in the last 100 years, developmental psychologists have shown us that it is really possible through your behavior and through the health practices that you engage in, that we can stave off the inevitable decline that occurs in our physical and psychological well-being throughout what we used to call late adulthood, which is the 60 and after. See, back in the day, 60 and 70 used to be old. Now we know that 70 can actually be young. And so this way of thinking about ages sort of allows us to differentiate between what we might call young old people and old people. Now, the sad fact is, despite your behavioral intentions for most people, there is going to be an inevitable decline during the fourth age of life. And very few people, like my grandma, are going to be able to keep their physical and mental acuity throughout their life. It's very, very rare. Okay? Now, here's the deal. I want to take a couple of minutes. I hope I'm not boring you right now, or I hope you're following the lecture and finding it interesting. Give me a couple of more minutes, and I want to talk about the organization of this book. All right? Now, here's the way, if you remember from the lifespan perspective, I suggested to you that lifespan development is multi-directional. It involves biological processes like our brain, our nervous system. We're going to talk about how that develops. Our cognitive abilities, our mind, how our mental abilities, our memory, our logical reasoning, how those develop, and how our personality develops. So these are the three broad dimensions on which we follow the human developmental trajectory. If you look through your book, what you're going to notice is that the chapters are organized in this way. There will be a set of chapters on infancy, and we'll talk about biological changes in infancy. Then we'll talk about cognitive changes in infancy, and then we'll talk about socio-emotional changes in infancy. So the study of human beings is divided into these three processes. And this is so that we can focus and understand each unique set of processes separate from the others. Now, the biological development is what's going to create the cognitive and socio-emotional development. But it's useful to think of these as three different developmental trajectories that human beings follow. Now, not only do we divide it into three developmental domains, but developmental psychologists break up this study of human development into different groups, because the biological changes that are happening in infants is very different from the biological changes that are happening in late adulthood. So your book is actually divided into 24 chapters. Yeah, right? It definitely is a refresher from Psych 150. And I act 16, Melanie. Most people are always telling me to grow up, but I don't care. The man ain't going to get me down. All right? And so what you're going to notice is that there are going to be 3 chapters on infancy. And then we're going to move and we're going to have 3 chapters on early childhood. And then 3 chapters on middle adulthood. And so what we do is we break the study of human beings not only into these 3 broad domains of development, but also we break the study up based on age of the developmental subject. Some developmental psychologists focus on infancy, some focus on adolescence, some focus on aging and senescence at the end of this spectrum. Now, what I would like for you to know for the first exam is I would like for you to at least know these 8 categories. Prenatal development, then there's infancy, then there's early childhood, which is before you go to kindergarten, then middle and late childhood is school age but not in puberty. Adolescence is puberty to probably drinking age. Young adulthood is your 20s and 30s when you're getting married and having kids. Middle adulthood is what I'm in, when you're not as good as you used to be, but you're still as good once as you ever were. And then there's late adulthood, which is the time we usually think about around retirement. And so I would like for you on the exam, if I ask you, hey, Sammy is 12 years old, what developmental age group is he in? I want you to know that he's not in young adulthood or early childhood, right? So I want you to basically understand the organizational structure of this book for the class. Is that clear? I hope everybody's got that. I'll wait for some questions in the chat bar. All right? So, and what you're going to find at every age of study and for every ability, there are going to be general debates that developmental psychologists have. So we're going to talk about whether or not these abilities that are developing and are driven by genes or whether or not they are affected by the environment. So we're going to talk about the nature and nurture issue. And so you might not know it, but nurture or the environment does affect very basic physiological abilities like vision and hearing. And we'll talk about critical periods and how they affect the development of some really biological looking abilities. Then we're going to talk about the degree to which abilities are changing or are stable. So how does personality change as we mature from infancy through early adulthood? At what point does your personality become stable? Does it remain stable for your entire life? And so developmental psychologists argue about how much our abilities change or remain stable. And then we have discussions sometimes that ask the question, are people at different age groups fundamentally different, or are they existing on the same dimension of abilities? So is there a fundamental difference between the way a 2-year-old sees the world and an 8-year-old sees the world? Is there a fundamental difference between the way an 8-year-old sees the world and a 90-year-old sees the world? Or is it just the 90-year-old has more intelligence? So we ask the question about whether or not our abilities exist on continuum from more to less, or whether or not they just fundamentally change, kind of like a caterpillar changing into a butterfly, which we would call discontinuous development. So we're going to talk about we're going to debate on whether or not abilities change continuously or discontinuously. All right, so that's really all I had to say today. I just wanted you to know that the lifespan perspective has really contributed to how well you and I are living our life right now. And if you will take some lessons from what I teach you this semester, your life will, you will hopefully be able to achieve successful at aging and live a very active, happy life from now until the day you have to die, right? I want you to understand that development is affected by many factors. Yes, it is your environment, and I'm going to talk about the environmental effects, but it's also genes, it's also culture, it's also society, it's a lot of things. And I want you to really focus on this goal of successful aging, because you can achieve that. And then I want you to know that developmental psychologists think about nature versus nurture, stability versus change, and whether or not this change is discontinuous or continuous. Well, that's really all I had to say today. It's been a pleasure lecturing you, talking to you, not lecturing you. We've interacted. I'm going to be having the webinar tomorrow from 1 to 2 p.m. I put some videos in your resources folder, in your webinar folder. So what I want you to do, in fact, is to, I want you to make sure you look in that before you get there tomorrow. So let me show you that real quick. Oh, let me go to that real quick. Okay, let's see. So, right here. Be sure to click on, let's see, the lessons folder for tomorrow's webinar. Click on the lessons folder. Oh, this doesn't work as well as I'd like. Then if you go into the week 1 folder, I've got too many levels. Dadgummit. Let's see. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit to the collaboration activity. And if you look inside the weekly webinar folder, what you're going to notice is that I've got some videos. I've got sort of an introduction telling you what I think is important and what I want you to focus on, and I'm going to give you some videos to watch. So prepare with those videos. Prepare with those videos for the webinar tomorrow. Now remember, you don't have to come to the webinar. If you want, you can go to the discussion. You can do the discussion board, and I will look and make sure that I'm interacting with you on the discussion board. But if you want to come to the webinar, I'd like to talk to you about your own development. Any questions? It'll probably take you a minute to type up your questions, and by then the broadcast will be over. Actually, let me do this. Let's see. Doesn't look like we have any questions. I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Thank you very much for coming today, and I hope to see you Wednesday in webinar. Take care.